Here to discuss tariffs, the economy, markets, and more, I want to bring in Kevin O'Leary, O'Leary Ventures Chairman, to discuss. Kevin, always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for making time for us this morning. As you know, the markets just want clarity here on this tit for tat on tariffs. The tensions seem to be getting worse, not better. What does the off-ramp look like where we can start to see this wrapping up so that the market can just have some clarity, even if it's bad news?
The off-ramp starts on April 2nd when the tariff schedules for all countries, Canada, Mexico, European countries included, are actually detailed in the sense that, remember, think about this. Tariffs, particularly European and some Canadian tariffs, were put on after Second World War. And they have never been examined or even discussed in many negotiations over the past decades. So let me give you an example. It's very simple to understand. Vermont produces dairy products. They're tariffed at 243% going into the province of Quebec, Canada. Mm-hmm. A reciprocal response would be to do the same to any dairy products coming out of Quebec into the United States. And that's exactly what's going to happen on April 2nd. And it'll be the same for India, agricultural products in England, the same for Mexican products. And so what we're doing here is we're getting a big reset. Trump has made it very clear from 30,000 feet that he wants to reset all the tariff schedules from as far back as the Second World War and just have reciprocal tariffs. Now, the thing about tariffs, you have to think of them as negotiating tools of economic warfare. That's the way I look at it. So back to the dairy example. After a while, both sides look at each other and say, well, we're both tariffing each other at 243%. There's really no economic gain. This is kind of stupid because we don't have access to each other's markets, particularly if you're in Quebec and you want to sell to Texas.
Yeah.
Why don't we just forget about tariffing dairy and we'll just open it up to free trade? And then you look at the same thing with aluminum, where the U.S. says, well, gee, we've only got 2 smelting plants and we need more aluminum. For the 15 years it's going to take to build new plants, we'll just drop the tariffs on aluminum. How about potash with Saskatchewan? There is no potash in the U.S., but farmers need it. Why tariff that at 25%?
So, Kevin, how quickly do we get there? Do we get to this euphoric era that you're talking about here of free trade? Because it sounds like something that takes a long time, and the market is selling off now.
Yeah, it's already sold off. You've got your 10% correction, but the economy is quite strong, so is the consumer. So in the case of Canada, nothing's going to happen for at least 90 days because there's no prime minister there. There's an interim one, and we need an election in Canada. Then we'll be dealing with somebody with a 4-year mandate. In the case of Europe, they've already started, the British particularly, on the agriculture, Ireland yesterday. So these things take, months. But the market's not stupid. I mean, you have to decide now if you're an investor. Are these tariffs going to be the McKinley-type tariffs which stay on for 20 years? Or is this a negotiating tactic to have reciprocal arrangements around the world with the United States? I'm in the camp that says Trump doesn't want to trash the market indefinitely. Mm-hmm. What he wants to do is use his first 24 months, his majority mandate before the midterms, to drive home a flat reciprocal environment for trade worldwide. And then he comes into the midterms with that achieved, because you can achieve that in 2 years. And that supports his party maintaining a slight majority, which I think is a good strategy. And yes, there's volatility. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes volatility. But the market's was extremely expensive. And frankly, for many of us, I've lived through multiple corrections up to 20%. I have to admit, I did some buying lately, I can't catch the bottom, but I'm seeing great companies that still have great growth prospects selling down. You talk about the big 7. The average company in NASDAQ's down 30 to 40%.
Right.
And so there's lots of, and Russell 2000, it's fraught with value all over the place.
So then what are you buying, Kevin? What are you buying right now?
Well, I buy indices. And so, look, I'm just being transparent. I like to find indices that are rules-based. I use ALPS because I once had a ETF company that did this, mm-hmm. and I used their OUSA product for the S&P 500 and OUSM for the Russell 2000. And I bought more because it's on sale. And everybody feels, oh my goodness, it's the end of the free world as we know it. This always happens. Nobody likes volatility. But as an investor, you learn that you have to hold your nose. And when there's blood in the streets, you have to be buying. It's an old adage, but it's not incorrect. You just have to look long term and realize these are buying opportunities, but never think you're going to catch the bottom. I don't even guess to do that. I don't try and time the market.
So, Kevin, I'm fascinated by this. It sounds like you are buying the dip on small caps, even though the Federal Reserve may have to keep interest rates higher for longer off the back of the inflation that these tariff policies are going to cause.
Well, inflation data yesterday was flat. I don't think there'll be 2 cuts this year. That's my assumption. So I kind of think everybody should chillax, looking for Fed support. This idea of 3 cuts, forget it. I mean, their mandate's 2%. We're sitting at 3. So it's 33% higher than it has to be. And we got to wait. I mean, look, we put $2 trillion of free cash into the market in the last mandate, the last president. And I understand he had to deal with COVID, but now this money's sloshing around, keeping all kinds of stuff inflated, including housing and proteins and energy.
But you are an executive yourself, Kevin. You're not just an investor. And corporate America is begging this administration for clarity on these tariff policies because right now they're in this unknown and they're having to pause on hiring, pause on CapEx. Also, we're seeing small business confidence falling off a cliff. Doesn't that give you a concern that we might be heading toward a recession?
No, I don't see the recession. I get the tear sheets from my own 54 private companies in all 11 sectors every Tuesday. I don't see it yet. Consumer's still strong. Look, I'm not saying we won't have one, but I don't see it yet. And I think the effects of tariffs will be short-lived. And I'm in the camp that says they're just being used as negotiating tools. No, I don't see the recession. If we had really, really, really difficult times with interest rates, maybe. But right now, see, for me, I have to do CapEx every quarter in the terms of inventory. So if I thought there was a recession, I would pull my horns in, spend less cash. But then I'd miss the opportunity of sales, which are remaining buoyant. And every retailer has the same problem. Every business has the same problem. And I think, yes, they like to jawbone uncertainty because of volatility on trade policy, but that's not actually what they're doing with their capital yet. You can keep talking about it and jawboning it, but you have to make a decision every single day. And we're not in recession decision-making mode yet.
So you're not pulling back on CapEx at all in your businesses?
No, not. And I'm 4 or 5 months ahead. So I'm worried about holiday for this coming year. So I have to build inventory, put it on the water to sell in September for holiday. And I talk to my CEOs every day. We talk about this every single day.
And they're not asking you about this administration and the lack of, every CEO I have talked to has said they want clarity. I find it hard to believe that none of your CEOs have said they want that clarity.
Well, remember, 62% of job creation in America is companies 5 to 500 employees.
Right, and small business confidence is falling off a cliff.
Yeah, but you're talking mostly about indexing this S&P 500, which only creates 38% of jobs, and half of them are overseas. So I actually listen to the people that are the American economy.
But I am talking about small business owners who are saying that they are pausing on hiring, who make up, to your point, 80% of hiring in this country because they're concerned about tariff policy.
Well, I'm not seeing that. We're still hiring. I mean, look, you can say one thing to someone who's doing market research, and then you have to turn around and deal with your business. You're asking me, do I see a recession? I'm telling you, no, not yet. We may talk again in 30 days and I may have a different answer. But right now, as I go through the tear sheets of last Tuesday, I don't see it. And that was in the middle of the craziness in the White House about tariffs. So yes, you can have, when the market declines 10%, people get nervous. That's volatility. But it doesn't necessarily change their day-to-day decision on CapEx, which drives job creation and growth. Because the consumer, yes, we're talking because you're Yahoo Finance. The average guy on the street is not as myopically focused on the Dow and the NASDAQ as we are.
Right, but they may be focused on the slowdown in hiring, but I'm going to let it go. I really want to get your thoughts on Canada before we let you go. Obviously, Prime Minister-elect Mark Carney is saying he is ready to talk to the president as long as Trump is willing to recognize Canadian sovereignty. Do you want Canada to be the 51st state? How are you reacting to the pushback from Canadian citizens as well?
Yeah, I don't think Canada's for sale. I think the Canadians have made that very clear. But the opportunity of an economic union is huge. Unfortunately for Carney, he's not going to be the one to negotiate it. Unlikely. He'll probably lose in the general election in the next 90 days to a man named Pierre Poilievre, who's leading in the polls.
But haven't Canadian citizens pushed back against him as the Canadian MAGA, given the tariff policy? and the pushback from Canadians on tariffs?
That is one narrative, but when you actually look at the challenges, most people realize Carney is just Trudeau 2.0, and Trudeau was a disaster. His policies took the Canadian dollar from parity with U.S. down 41% and put basically 25% of the Canadian population into poverty. So it's not hard for the opposition, in this case the Conservatives, to paint the Trudeau 2.0 brush on Carney, because Carney has the same policies. He wants to double down on carbon tax on businesses, the same green agenda, massive wokeness, elitism. I mean, he's got all these problems that he's a Davos guy. And most Canadians don't know him because he didn't really live in Canada. He worked at the Bank of England for a majority of his period in recent times. And so he's got his uphill battle too. I doubt that it's not really, yesterday in an interview, Howard Lutnick said, look, we know that we can't negotiate a pan-Canadian deal. We're going to get Ford, this Premier of Ontario, to lower the rhetoric, invite him to the White House. He's there this morning. But a pan-Canadian deal needs a new prime minister, and there's no point in negotiating an interim guy for either side. They want to get the decision made. Right. And so basically, call it NAFTA 3, won't be negotiated until after the Canadian election. And it's important because, frankly, the opportunity, and Trump sees this, you got to differentiate the noise from the signal with Trump. He sees, when he keeps saying, I want to buy Canada, there's a reason. The U.S. is the largest consumer market on earth, and Canada is the richest country on earth on natural resources that are proven.
Yeah.
You want to combine those economies, you create a behemoth China will never catch up to. You don't have to buy the country to do it. You just have to negotiate a deal where the economies are combined, maybe a common currency, maybe a EU-type passport, and certainly no tariffs.